Hi, Clint Coons here with Anderson Business Advisors, and in this video I'm going to discuss buying property with a limited liability company. Now, if you're a real estate investor, you've probably been told that you can acquire property with an LLC. And in fact, that would be the best way to go, because why buy it in my own name if I turn around and just deed it into an LLC? And I get a lot of new real estate investors that will come up to me, they'll see me at one of my events, or they'll just email me and they'll ask me, how do I go about acquiring or buying property in the name of an LLC? Well, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what type of financing are you using? If it's just cash, not a problem. You can close directly in that limited liability company. However, when you have financing involved, there's going to be the problem. If you're using traditional financing, if it's a Freddie Fannie loan, then if the property itself is residential, they're going to require that you close in your own name. You're not going to be able to close in the LLC, so it's a non-starter. So don't even attempt to put that deal together in that LLC name. Now, if it's not a Freddie or Fannie loan, let's assume it's a loan from a community lender. So it's what we refer to as a portfolio loan. So this community lender bank that you're working with, they don't intend to sell it. They have different guidelines. They will probably allow you to close in the limited liability company. So in that case, you could set up the LLC in order to close. Now, one thing to also consider here when you're thinking about closing in the name of an LLC, the question I would have is, how was that purchase and sale agreement put together? Was the purchase and sale agreement written up between yourself and the seller, or did you leave yourself some wiggle room? Because many times, a lot of people, they don't follow my advice and set up a few LLCs and have what I call them on the shelf LLCs ready to go to put in their offers. And so they're scrambling. I mean, this just comes from experience. You should have LLCs set up ahead of time. That's something I do a lot with my clients is I create, 2 or 3 LLCs and I tell them these are always going to be there for make your offers in these limited liability companies so that we can close in the name of them. Now, if you begin or you have a subscription to Procrastinators Monthly and you're a little slow on that, then what you should do in your purchase and sale agreements and write them up as follows. Let's say you're going to buy in your own name, or you're putting it in your own name, or maybe you have a corporation. You would put down Clint Coons and/or designated entity. All right, use that language, not and/or signs, which a lot of people have used in the past, which is now looked at skeptically by sellers and their agents. I use and/or designated entity, and then here's what I tell people if I'm ever questioned on that. I explain to the seller or their agent, the reason I include that extra language in there is that I've not yet talked to my tax professional or my attorney about how I need to take title for estate planning and taxes, and that they may advise me to take it in a limited liability company. So that's why I'm putting that additional language in there, because I may close in an LLC. That explanation works. Okay, I have not had anybody reject that explanation, because now you've told them that it's your local professionals or your professionals that are advising you to do this. And so they don't want to practice law without a license. So the realtors will oftentimes back down when you give them that rationale. So anyhow, if you're using anything other than traditional financing, like I talked about, if it's a community bank, then you can close directly in that limited liability company. And if you're going to do that, some things you need to keep in mind. You better make sure that with the LLC that you're not using a nominee on there. There's a lot of people that, we even talk about it, Nevada limited liability companies with a nominee manager. Well, the problem is if you're using a nominee manager, it's not you. That's going to create title issues for you trying to close in the name of an LLC, and your lender is going to have a heartache with that. So you're going to want to set up an LLC where either your information is publicly visible, or if you want anonymity, what I often tell people, set up a fresh new Wyoming LLC or Delaware LLC where your name and your information is not provided to the Secretary of State. Then you'll close in that entity, and with title and with your lenders, they'll just ask to see a copy of the operating agreement showing you as the manager and member of that company. Funny thing about that is what has occurred before is I'll have a lender title ask me or ask my clients to update the state, have their information listed. And it's kind of comical because we call them back and we tell them, inform them, that's impossible. The state doesn't accept that information. So even if I sent it to them, they wouldn't put it up there. And then they come back to us and they say, oh, we understand. Okay, great. As long as we have your operating agreement, it shows your position in that company, that you're the owner, you're the manager, we can proceed forward with this. So you want to make sure that either your name's listed on the entity itself as a member or manager with the Secretary of State where the LLC is set up, or you're using an entity such as a Wyoming or Delaware LLC that provides anonymity. The other thing you're going to need is a certificate of good standing. Typically, this needs to be acquired within 30 days of closing. So be prepared to obtain that. You're going to have to contact the Secretary of State, request the certificate of good standing in order to close. If you do not have that certificate of good standing, it will hold up your closing. It's a kind of a ridiculous requirement, from my opinion, that many of these LLCs are just recently set up within the last 6 months. There's no way they could have been revoked. But again, rather than fight them and try to argue they don't need the information, just give them what they need so you can close on your property and move on. Now, of course, if you're buying for cash or you have private money that's coming in to fund a deal, it's never going to be an issue. But when working with lenders, those are some of the things that you need to take into consideration. Get that LLC set up ahead of time, make your offer in it. If not, do and/or designated entity. When you go to closing, make sure you have your operating agreement ready for title for the lender, and also make sure you have a certificate of good standing. My name is Clint Coons with Anderson Business Advisors, and we just covered how to purchase real estate with a limited liability company.